Hello, thanks for joining us. I'm Bonnie Burkert, and this is Truth Be Told Transformation, bringing you the tools for transformation to live your highest truth, whatever that might be. So today, we are going to discuss a fascinating subject for me, witchcraft. Now, a lot of people may default to the scary witch, dark magic, but don't forget there are good witches everywhere. And one of the best ones that we're going to get a chance to talk to is Mr. Griffin Ced from here in Los Angeles at the Greenman Store. Welcome, Griffin.
Hello, how you doing?
Very well now that you've been here. So, as we tape, it is the magical time of October, and it's actually a full moon, so I welcome, extra amplified energy around that. And, of course, tiptoeing towards Halloween, which is known in the pagan tradition as Samhain.
Yes.
So I would love to ask you to please talk a little bit about that and then tiptoe your way into you as a witch father.
Okay. Yeah, we are only a couple of weeks away from Hallows, another term we use for Samhain. Of course, that originally comes from All Hallows Eve. It's where we get the word Halloween from. And traditionally for us, it's a time when we commune with the spirits of our ancestors and bring basically communion back with relatives, loved ones who have passed across, but also to do some practical workings to try and help those lost souls who have not crossed over. In the Death Mysteries that I work with, I do a class on it at least once a year from the Green Man. We talk about how at the moment of death, if people are not prepared to reach forward and cross through to the other side, if they back away from the event and have no sense of changing their self-identity from being a living person to being a non-corporeal ancestral spirit, then they can get trapped here. And that's where we get the whole background and history of ghosts. The idea that they self-identify as living people, but they are only spirit. There is no flesh. And so when these lost souls are wandering the earth, trapped in this world, but not really physical in this world, they have no means then to cross over into the afterlife. Crossing over into the afterlife is like a re-identification of self. And so we have at Samhain something that we talk about, which is called the wild hunt. In many cultures, the wild hunt is led by Herne or Hecate, Goda. There are many different kinds of mythologies in the witch lore, depending on where you're coming from, that are about this whole wild hunt, going out looking for the lost souls, picking them up and taking them through the portal into the afterlife. And so as witches, we gather and we celebrate with our ancestors, but we also do a working to open a gate for the lost souls and to attract as many as possible to the light beacon that we raise with our bow fire. And when they come and gather, we help them across. It's part of the Death Mysteries service that witches do at this time of year.
That's interesting. The wild hunt. I've never heard that before. One of the things I'd like to share with you in my experiences around this time of year is that I was down in Mexico and they were celebrating Halloween Eve, so the night before. And it was interesting how everybody was, there were no trick-or-treat costumes like we have here, like sexy nurse and funny things like that. It was all dark and shadowy. And then the next day, everybody had a parade and went into the graveyards and celebrated on the tombstones in a beautiful way. So I think I really would like to demystify death in that way, that we should celebrate those who have passed on and still stay tuned into them. So let's all think about that.
In the tradition that I work with, and we do this also publicly in a very big gathering in Los Angeles every Samhain, we have around 200 witches gather for what I call a Grand Coven working. And we have about a 22-foot running altar that we cover with dirt and create basically like a graveyard situation where they can come and put pictures and and like stones for their beloved ones who have crossed over,
That's
and
great.
that's the altar that we are working with. You mentioned the costumes. It's kind of fun because another thing about Samhain is we consider this to be a time when the veil gets very thin, and our perception and awareness of the fairy folk, goblins, fairies, elves, basically land wights, the spirits of the land, they come into our awareness, and so during this time, it was also practice, folklore practice, to dress up in costumes that made you look like the ghouls and the fairy folk, so that you could walk around without being captured by the fairy and taken into the other world. And this is the root, I believe, from where we get all the costuming and the guising. It's not unusual in old folklore practices to guise, to take the spirit of something other than oneself through a costume into your identity, so that you can both celebrate the other realms and walk among them safely.
That's great. That's a nice detail as well. So let's talk a little bit about witchcraft. I definitely want to hear some specifics about your traditional witchcraft practice. And Griffin has decades of awareness, his family lineage. So you'll tell us a little bit about that. But let's just start off with the beginning, because I feel that, as I mentioned in the beginning, a lot of times there's a negative charge around that word. So I would invite you to give us a little bit of info on the really the definition of witchcraft, and to invite people to explore with an open mind.
Well, witchcraft is a term that, if you look down, the practitioners of my family, and the folks who used to practice the gifts, they would never really have self-identified as a witch. A witch was a label that was put on people who organized religion perceived as being heretics, so they would circumvent the priesthood of their religion, and by circumventing the priesthood and having direct communion with spirits and including God, that would challenge the authority and the monopoly that the priesthood have. So heresy was one of the things that which was sought out with witches. They persecuted witches because of the heresy, but also they had an understanding of witchcraft as negative magic, that it was baneful magic. And if you go to Africa, for example, now you'll find in Africa, if people call you a witch in Africa, then they are looking at you in terms of being a practitioner of baneful magic. So the term witchcraft is being reclaimed in today's world since the repealing of the witchcraft laws in the late 1950s in Britain. Um, they have tried very hard to sort of re-identify witchcraft as a practice that that can be applied both benevolently and banefully. It really is a question of the virtue and the ethics of the practitioner. Most people that I come across have no interest in serving their ego towards ambitious ends that only serve themselves. They are looking to actually make the world a better place. And if you are in the service, if you use your art in the service of trying to create something better, by pushing fate, by bringing about changes through your witchcraft, through spellcrafting, magic, then that is what I consider a good witch, a person who is in accord with a bigger plan, a bigger ambition. So so we teach this, and we teach people how, if you do bad rotten magic, then you finish up being co-creative to create a world around you that's really not very pleasant to live in. But you don't get to do negative magic and walk away from it. It becomes part of the reality that you have to live in. And so people that are working negative, baneful type magic tend to finish up in a crisis-ridden, drama-ridden reality that's not very pleasant to actually live in. So it only serves people who are working magic to really try and use their gift to create a better world, one that is enlightened, one that is full of wonder and mystery, and make an adventure out of your life. That to me is what is the gift of doing witchcraft, if you apply it in the proper way.
Oh, make an adventure out of your life. That's beautiful. And I think it's about tuning in on all levels, right? I mean, would be where that adventure might come in.
Yeah, I mean, traditional witchcraft, as I practice it and understand it, is really defined by a couple of things. One is the gifts, which is a natural born predisposition to have a deeper awareness of the subtle forces and presences that are in our universe. If you become aware of the presence of these energetic qualities and you have the ability through spellcrafting and magic to affect change upon those presences and therefore bring about change in the world, then that is what I call a traditional witch. Its root in the old ways, in the fact that we commune with spirits and work with spirits, is where we get the term the old religion from, where people were incorporating the religion of mainstream society, but at the same time they would engage in communion with the land wights and the spirits around them, the old gods, because they understood that reality was built upon a relationship between us as practitioners and the spiritual realms.
Griffin, you grew up in England and now you've been in Los Angeles for a while. I would love to ask a little bit what that was like growing up with some of these traditions and now how things are evolving with people's interest in being open and it just being a little bit more acceptable. Like you said, there's been a bit of mainstreaming of the term witchcraft, and maybe we thank Harry Potter for that. So let's go back to England.
Yeah, I grew up in Britain, in London. My family's originally from Hertfordshire. We spent a part of my teens out in Essex, and at 11 years old, I was introduced to a witchcraft house by my mother, and I spent 4 or 5 years basically where that became my life. Outside of school, I would go and I'd spend my evenings there, sometimes late into the night. My parents were completely accepted as long as I was at the house. Then I had the ability to come and go, as needed. What I learned in the house was how to develop the gifts, how to commune with spirits, how to commune with the ancestors. That was the focus of our work. It was very different from what people have come to know as Wicca, which is a lot more rooted in ceremonial magic and structure and liturgy. In the practice that I was raised in, it was a lot more oriented towards the development of one's own personal gifts to heal, to commune with spirits, to seek the mysteries that are inherent within our bloodstream, the ancestral memory that flows within us, and to find a way to evolve with that in order to develop a different sensibility of the world. I look at traditional witchcraft as a way of looking at the world around us, perceiving a different place. Um, because I mean that's true in all cases. All people really are experiencing the world that they can perceive through the context of their lives and what's going on around them, and we evolve differently because of that. And and so traditional witchcraft is very much tied to the gifts for me. But there's a lot of people that are in today's world developing traditional witchcraft that would be tied up in the grimoires of the old ways and the practices of people who created those grimoires. But that's not the kind of traditional witchcraft that I'm really engaged in. I find there's a lot of insight and inspiration in their work. But I grew up in having witchcraft as a living tradition that I'm engaged in a direct Gnostic manner. It's not based on on the practices of the past, rather than through the development of myself as my primary tool in the here and now, so that I am co-creative in the world that I'm experiencing.
Wow, that's great. And I mean, you use the word tools, which is one of my goals here. And so let's take a look at what that would be, because one of my understanding of a lot of practices in witchcraft and ritual are the rituals. And within the rituals, there are the tools that are used. It might be incense, it might be a chalice, and things like that. So, just curious. I mean, how do you feel those factor in? How do they factor in for you? How do they factor in general? And are things evolving? I mean, maybe we use those initially, and maybe we need them less. Energy is shifting and change, just like you said. You tuned in
I,
yourself.
I think people are being attracted to witchcraft today, whether it's Wicca or whether it's traditional craft. I think there's a great interest in it because it offers the individual the ability to develop a relationship with spirit on one's own terms. And I think a lot of people today are turning away from organized religion and looking for a different way to fill that need of spiritual connection. And so the independence that witchcraft offers, I think, is very attractive to a lot of people who are growing up today. Um, I can understand people that want to be completely freeform and work in the moment energetically and remove all of the structure and the ritual elements. But part of the problem with that approach, in my opinion, is if you don't break down what you're working with, the cosmology, the different qualities of spirit, and bring a structure to those different qualities that allow you to externalize through the tools and through the ritual constructs to externalize what it is that you are actually working with and encountering, then it's going to be very difficult to have a clear grasp that you can translate into your intelligence, that you can use as a foundation and build and reach further and evolve further. Clarity of language is something that, whether you're working with music or whether you're working with philosophy, all forms of art, it requires a clarity of language in order for us to really take what we're experiencing and forge forward, creating something clearer that can mediate, that can be a legacy to pass on, and so that we can really understand deeper what it is that we're connecting to. And if you remove those external expressions, like the ritual format, the tools around us, the manner in which we locate different qualities of spirit in different directions, then we're going to lose the ability to really grasp. It becomes, oh, I encountered this experience and it was really cool and it made me feel great, but I don't really understand it and I have no way to repeat it and I can't build on it because I don't completely understand it. I just felt it. There's no ability to translate the work into something that becomes consequential that you can build upon.
That's very, very interesting. Now, one of the things that you mentioned was language. And
Yeah.
I heard in one of your other interviews, you had some very wise words about the spoken word. And so I'd love to hear from you on that because that certainly would be part of ritual.
Well, the system that I work that's different from Wicca is lends its magical construct from ceremonial magic, and so therefore it works what's called elemental magic, which means that the primary expressions of spirit, which are the four primal directions, are based upon how we experience earth, air, fire, and water in their physical spirit manifestation. So, fire is the quality of fire, the spirit of fire. Water is the spirit of water. It's very simple. It's very manifest, and it's going to try and express itself in the shortest, clearest way that it can. Fire is going to try and set fire to your space. Water is going to want to flood your space. Um, that's one of the reasons why when ceremony magicians or Wiccans work with the elemental system, they wield the blade because the iron is a means by which they can control elemental spirits and keep them basically from becoming destructive.
Can I just
Uh,
interject really quick? The wielding of the blade is the anthemi.
yeah, the Athame. Yeah,
Yeah, the athami. So you might see some of the motion with that. So I just thought I'd
yeah. The wielding
tap
of
in
the
on that.
Athame. The key to the Athame is that it's actually ferrous metal. It's iron, and iron creates magnetic ley lines, which bring control into the picture, so that one has the ability to control the spirits that you are working with. And when you're working with elemental spirits, that's really important because elemental spirits, as I say, they're simple spirits that have a primary desire simply to express themselves physically in the most potent way they can. And you don't really want your house burning down just because you invoked fire, the spirit of fire, into your home. So that's how basically most people are working with the Wiccan constructs,
Okay.
working with the Wiccan traditions. What I work with is a little different. It's called the Erz system. If you look in the old Greek ways, you'll hear that back in the old days, witches used to tie the winds into handkerchiefs and sell them to sailors. This whole idea of capturing the winds and in knots, which is basically spirit traps, is the root of a system that works with the winds of creation. And the winds of creation are like the breath of the dragon. They are the potent forces that push and move the tides of spirit. And in actual fact, the very winds themselves are the spirits. Um, in the Greek, they have a term called pneuma. Pneuma, as we know from the pneumatic drills, which is an air-based drill, is the term for the winds. It's the term for air, but it is also used as an expression for spirit. So the idea of winds and spirits are synonymous in this system. So when I work with an air-based system, putting air in the north, I'm not working with the elementals as much as I'm working with the spirit qualities of the compass directions.
Hmm, I see.
And at the root of this, for example, Hecate. Hecate, her name, Hecate, comes from the old Egyptian system of word magic, which is Hekas. The Hekas is the language of the spoken word that brings change. It's basically the spirit embedded within the language itself. And so Hecate is like the goddess of the crossroads because she is the midwife that births spirit into expression. And you do it through basically words of magic. You do it through conjuration, through the charms, through invocation. You can't do magic in your head. Everything has to be expressed through your mouth because as you speak words with the right quality of spirit being held within you, you're actually birthing reality through spirits that are coming in the form of words from your mouth. So, language and the expression of spirit through words is really at the foundation of traditional witchcraft, in that is the air system that we work with.
That's very interesting. And I'm going to refer to a few yogis that have been on the show that bring forth mantra and different
Yeah.
understanding of how mantra works that way. So isn't that interesting to see the Eastern traditions and you're
Mhm.
pulling in some of those traditions as well? So
Yes.
I I, I won't ask you any specifics, but are you working with very old languages? Do those work differently than just affirming I am powerful in the here and now?
Yeah. No. I work with some of the old languages. More, I would say, I work with some of the old alphabets. When you have like the runes or the Hebrew alphabet, you any of the pictographic alphabets, you're looking at each glyph representing a cosmic concept. It's different from the Latin language because the Latin, each glyph, letter of the alphabet, is only representing a sound. And in order to bring expression or identity to it, you string it together with other letters, and then the letters become words, and you put the words into sentences. And that's how we're working with that language. When you go back to the old alphabets, each glyph is actually a representative of foundational concepts within their cosmology, within their society. And so the glyph itself is an expression of a realm of reality, you could say, like commerce or love or power, life, death. Some of the foundational concepts are represented by simple glyphs, and those glyphs also represent a singular sound. So, so the old alphabet gives us access to legacy. It gives us access to insight into the realms that the old ones used to work with. Um, One that I'm particularly interested in myself is the Omic alphabet, which is tied to the trees,
Mm.
because the sounds hold concepts, concepts that are hung upon the trees themselves. And so you have living mediators of that legacy that you can commune with, the different trees, and the qualities that those trees carry within themselves become a really workable magical language that you can employ in ritual and in spellcrafting. Now, I take that and then I put it into practice by putting it in the modern world. I'm not one of those people that want to turn the clock back and work the old ancient world. I want to be a witch practicing in the world today. So I take the legacy of the past, like the Yomic alphabet, and I use it and arrange it and employ it in the context of the world that I'm actually working with today.
Amazing. Wow, it makes me definitely want to, commune with trees. What can we learn?
Trees are great. Trees are great. I love trees. I've
Aren't
been a
they?
tree hugger my whole life.
Right on. Well, I know, and it's I keep going back to what it must have been like for you in England. Somewhat more of a city in a city. I mean, you're in a city here in Los Angeles, but just watching the decades and how things have evolved, just for yourself as
Oh,
well as the population. So,
yeah, when I was a kid, there was no internet. I mean, I heard
right,
somebody say the other day in a comment about an interview I did, because I talked about how witchcraft came through a revival with a number of men. There was Gerald Gardner was probably one of the most important figures in terms of bringing witchcraft back into play. Now, he was partnered with Doreen Valiente as his high priestess, and a lot of the beautiful language and work that she put into that tradition is is very important. She is one of the architects that brought witchcraft back into play. But Gardnerian witches, the name comes from Gerald Gardner, and Gerald Gardner was the high priest, and he was really the architect of getting this back into play. And somebody commented that, well, no, but there's a whole bunch of women who are involved on Instagram, and obviously they are the first ones. And I looked at it and I kind of chuckled and I said, Instagram is I've lived through a time when the most sophisticated piece of technology we had to work with was a typewriter.
right,
It's,
exactly.
and then beepers. I mean, I remember I developed a whole way of working with beepers that different numbers meant different things. I created a beeper language to use it as a messaging system before you could actually text anybody. I mean,
Right? I know. It's just incredible. But what reach? And I know you are doing online classes, correct? So
yeah.
there's suddenly much broader reach for you. And curious, I mean, you have people from far, far away. I,
Yeah, I do. I used to have a very strong following here in Los Angeles because here is where I've been teaching physically, and we do a lot of classes, and then we do work on the floor, basically, where I'm giving people the ability to experience the work that I'm teaching. And I really do like that because working hands on really gives you a different insight and experience of the work so that you can own it. And I think that's important when you're teaching people. It's not for them to do what you do, but rather to find their own insights and learn through their own practice how they function and how they work with witchcraft. So that's kind of important. And when COVID came, it kind of pushed me. Been people have been asking for years for me to get online and make my classes more accessible, and it was always like, yeah, but we don't have the technology. And well, COVID kind of thrust us onto that stage, and we had to learn fast how to translate what we were offering through the Green Man and put it online. And now I've got people, all over the country and some from abroad who are tuning in for classes, and it's great. I found a different way to get the physical experience going through vision work, and that has been working very well as well. And so I have to say, being online has had some really good experiences and effects. But I still miss actually getting on the floor and working with people. I think it's really fun to be in sacred space physically with people and experience things in a two-way stream. When I'm online teaching, I'm really kind of like just putting out information, which makes it clearer. I don't get as much distraction going on, so I'm able to keep a clearer track on the classes. But I don't get as much experience back, and I really miss that. I like to. I like to make my journey with others, and I think the coming together with people in ritual is something that I'm really missing. And I look forward to getting past this COVID, where we can start having public rituals and experiencing communal energy working together. It's rough for witches who are stuck on their own, I tell you.
so we call you the Witch Father. And so I feel like what you're describing is about the community. And of course, we've all missed it in lots of different ways, whether it's a spiritual practice or a rock and roll concert, right? I mean, we've all are marching for a cause. I mean, we've missed finding each other, and yet I think that you'll see a lot of people speak to the benefits of having some time alone for the reflection that maybe went on in 2020. And so
Yeah.
we'll see. So now it's time to channel it into something that's really uplifting and powerful. So I think that we'll continue to educate ourselves, and certainly that's what we're doing here on the show. But I love your message of community, and I know that you've got some comments about the pagan community and how it's very diverse. So please share your thoughts on that. I liked hearing what you had to say about that.
Well, I'm a witch father because I have brought together a tradition, the Ced tradition, and therefore I am the witch father of my tradition. The tradition is reclaimed from its identity from the witch stream that I work with. The material that I'm working with and the approach, the foundation of the tradition really goes back to Essex, where I was working with these people, and I was initiated by them in '75. Um, Working with spirits and working with the potent forces of nature, the dragons, is at the root of my practice. How to bring that into a form that is workable for adults coming into it is what I've had to do over the 30 years that I've been leading this tradition. And so that's what makes me the witch father. But from early on, I was looking for other witches like me. I was looking for other traditions that I could reach out and connect with. And I spent a lot of my early years back in the early 90s trying to make alignments and open doors. And I had a few good encounters, but then I had a whole bunch of encounters where people just wanted to compete. There was this, who has the one and true tradition, and it's never worked for me that way. To me, each tradition is like its own language, and so you can't say that English is legitimate but French is not. It's a cultural difference, and traditions in our pagan community are the same kind of thing. You have different blood memories, different ancestral memories coming in their blood that lead them into different languages. And so when I look at a community, I'm looking at like the United Nations. I'm looking at a group of people who may come from with different languages, but there are certain common accord and certain common goals that we need to support each other and help each other. So rather than chase around trying to find others like me, what I started doing was I started sort of sharing. This is who I am. This is what I practice, and I started teaching because I wanted to, rather than chase other other covens and traditions. I thought if I throw down a spike right here, then those that like what I have to say will start to gather around me, and so I could find my people by being more public. And so I took a big step in becoming more of a public witch at that point. And people started asking me to lead community workings. And so for nearly 30 years, I've been also, as well as being invested in my tradition and my coven, I've been very invested in community building. And to me, community building means that you can't sit in judgment over other people's languages and other people's practices. You have to look at the root of their spirit and what it is they serve. And as long as they're serving diversity, tolerance, and solidarity, then you're welcome at my table, and I'll be there for you. I'll be at your back. And it's not a question of who's right and who's wrong in their practices. It's a question of how can I share what I'm holding in a way that can support you and help you find your own truth and your own path and make you stronger. Because if all the different factions of our community can find the security to feel strong and stand together united, then we can truly create a political sanctuary for people like us. We need each other for that sanctuary. We need that umbrella that keeps us safe because we're there at each other's backs, um, watching out for each other. So to me, community is really this alignment of diversity that I think creates a world that I want to live in. Like you said, I grew up in London and I live in Los Angeles. I don't know how to really be happy and function unless I'm in a multicultural environment. And that's something that I really value. I enjoy the different colors of various cultures around me. And I like that in my community. I think we have the most beautiful community to be found because of its diversity, and I really want to feed that diversity and empower others in their identity to create a sanctuary for all of us to come together, experience each other, but not lose ourselves in each other's cultures. I'm not looking to unify us under one practice as much as I'm looking to find a way to to unite us in solidarity without losing our individuality.
Amen. Very powerful. Thank you. This is great. So I invite everybody to make your way to Los Angeles. And if you're here, make your way to North Hollywood and to find Griffin. And hopefully there'll be classes there at the store soon. But in the meantime, you can certainly explore. I know that I've gotten some candles and some herbs from your store in the past.
Yep.
And it's great. And people are very knowledgeable and welcoming. And so come explore. I mean, it's a great practice. And I certainly have learned a lot, Griffin. I'm sort of having an understanding of the different aspects of witchcraft because I guess for me, I always thought mostly in terms of working with Wicca and their traditions, and you've certainly opened me up to understanding some of another approach. So very
There's
strong.
lots. I mean, we really have a lot of different traditions, and it's really amazing how rich our community is. The store, as you said, I mean, it works also on the same principle as my tradition, and in actual fact, we're one of the stores I think out there in the world that specialize in traditional witchcraft of the kind that we practice in my tradition. So we're very supportive of the gifts. We're very supportive of people who want to work magic, but we also work very much within an ethical framework. We offer spell services. We offer spiritual counseling and support, but never trying to co-opt people. Where you could say we're the opposite of a cult. We we encourage people to challenge everything, including us, so that they find their own connection to truth.
Thank you.
And that's really what the store is about.
Right. Connection to truth, truth be told, right there. Thank you for giving us that perfect segue to the show, Griffin. A beautiful way to wrap. And we really look forward to sharing your information far and wide. And thank you for joining us on the show today because it's been fascinating for me. And, blessed Samhain, whenever you may
Blessed
watch
Samhain.
this. I think that will be good vibes, even if you're watching this next summer or something like that. So,
Yeah,
um,
we're offering an online salon on the 29th, just so you know,
okay.
just to plug something there. We've got a salon working, which is a Vision Quest working, and we're offering it, I think, for the 29th, the
Fantastic.
Friday, the Friday before Hallows, because we don't want to conflict with Halloween. We all have kids. We'd like to dress up and go trick or treating too, you
Also,
know.
yeah, we want candy. Indeed. Brilliant. Thank you again, Griffin. This has been fascinating.
Thank you for inviting me.
Indeed. And everybody, please, we are here to open things up, a conscious community right here at Truth Be Told. I'm Bonnie Burkert. Please remember that you can see Robert Hensley's Minuteman Report on Mondays at 3. And of course, Tony Sweet. He's our witch father. Tony on his show live every Friday, 3 p.m. Pacific here on YouTube and listen to us on podcasts everywhere. Blessed be everyone. Be well. Thanks for listening and watching. Until the next time, namaste.